The devil didn't just appear in the Middle Ages, his story is much older. But medieval people took that story and made it their own. They shaped him into something real, something you could almost touch. To understand their devil, you have to go back to the Bible. In the Old Testament, he is a shadowy figure. He's the serpent in the Garden of Eden, a tempter. He's also there in the book of Job. Here, he's called Satan, which means the accuser. He isn't a king of hell yet. He's more like a prosecuting attorney in God's court. He wanders the earth and tests people's faith. He works for God, in a way. He points out flaws. He's a troublemaker, but he is still part of the heavenly council. There is no independent kingdom of evil. Then the New Testament changed things. The devil became a clear enemy. Jesus calls him the ruler of this world. He is the one who tempts Jesus in the desert. He offers him kingdoms and power. This is a big shift. He is no longer just an accuser. He is a rival. He has his own agenda. He is the father of lies. The letters of the apostles build on this. They talk about a cosmic war, a battle between good and evil, light and darkness. The devil is the commander of the dark forces. He leads an army of fallen angels. This idea of a cosmic war wasn't entirely new. Other cultures had similar beliefs. The Zoroastrians in Persia, for example, they believed the world was a battlefield between a good god and an evil one. This idea, called dualism, leaked into surrounding cultures. It helped Christians frame their own struggle. It gave them a language for the evil they saw in the world. But this created a problem for Christian thinkers. If God is all-powerful and all-good, where did the devil come from? Did God create evil? This was a tough question. Theologians like Augustine of Hippo wrestled with it in the early centuries of the church. He came up with an answer that would shape the entire Middle Ages. Augustine said the devil was not created evil. He was created good. He was an angel, maybe the most beautiful and powerful of all. His name was Lucifer, the light bearer. But he was given free will, just like humans. And he chose to use it badly. Filled with pride, he refused to serve God. He wanted to be God. He said, "I will not serve." This was the original sin, pride. So he fell. And he didn't fall alone. He convinced a third of the other angels to join his rebellion. They were cast out of heaven. They fell from grace and became demons, and hell wasn't a place God created to punish them. Hell was the state they created for themselves. It was the absolute absence of God. A place of total separation. This was a brilliant solution. It meant God didn't create evil. And evil was a corruption of good. It was a choice, a turning away from God. The devil wasn't an opposite God, equal in power. He was a created being, a fallen angel, powerful, yes, but not all-powerful. He could only operate within the limits God allowed. This theological foundation was incredibly important. It set the stage for everything that came later. The devil was now a defined character. He had a backstory, a motivation. He hated God. And since he couldn't hurt God directly, he chose to hurt the thing God loved most, humanity. He was jealous of us. We were made of dust and clay, yet God offered us the place in heaven that he had lost. So his entire purpose became to drag us down with him, to tempt us, to trick us, to make us choose pride over humility, just as he did. The war that started in heaven was now being fought on earth. And every human soul was the battlefield. This was the idea. The medieval world inherited. They didn't just believe it as a story. They felt it in their bones. It was the explanation for everything. For people in the Middle Ages, the devil was not a metaphor. He was not a symbol for the darkness inside us. He was a real being. He was as real as your neighbor, as real as the king, and he was always close. Life back then was hard and unpredictable. Crops failed, children died of fever. A sudden storm could sink a fishing boat. A cow could stop giving milk. We see these things as random events, bad luck or natural processes. They did not. They saw a world filled with spiritual forces. And when things went wrong, it was often the devil's work, or the work of his demons. They believed hell was an organized kingdom, a dark reflection of heaven. Satan was the emperor. Under him were dukes, princes, and legions of lesser demons. Each demon had a specific job. One might be in charge of causing lust. Another specialized in greed. Another would whisper lies into your ear to make you doubt your faith. They were an army, and their mission was to ruin you. This belief made the world a scary place. But it also made sense that it gave a reason for suffering. Your child's illness wasn't just a random tragedy. It was an attack. It was part of a great cosmic struggle. This didn't necessarily make it better, but it gave it meaning. And if it was an attack, you could fight back. How did the devil attack? Mostly through temptation. He was a master psychologist. He knew your weaknesses. If you were proud, he would flatter you. If you were greedy, he would show you gold. If you were lonely, he would offer you companionship, but at a terrible price. He rarely appeared with horns and a pitchfork. That would be too obvious. He came in disguise. As a beautiful woman, a handsome stranger, a friendly merchant, or even just as a thought that pops into your head. A little seed of doubt or anger that he plants and hopes you will water. But sometimes the attacks were more direct. People believed demons could physically interact with the world. They could sour the wine. They could make you trip and fall. They could possess animals, making them wild and dangerous. And, most terrifyingly, they could possess people. Demonic possession was the ultimate violation. It meant a demon had entered your body and taken control. It wasn't you speaking, it was the demon. It wasn't you screaming curses, it was the demon. Stories of possession were common. The possessed person might show superhuman strength. They might speak in languages they'd never learned. They might reveal secret sins of the people around them. They would show a violent hatred for anything holy. A crucifix, holy water, the name of Jesus. The church had an answer for this, the rite of exorcism. A priest, acting with the authority of God, could command the demon to leave. Exorcisms were dramatic, public battles. A struggle between the power of heaven and the malice of hell, fought over a human soul. The belief in possession shows how physically real the devil was to them. He wasn't just in your mind. He could be in your body. The devil was also seen as the master of illusions. He could trick your senses. He could make a stick look like a snake. He could make a pile of leaves look like a pile of gold coins, only to have them turn back to leaves in the morning. He was the great deceiver. This made the world a place where you couldn't always trust what you saw. So, the medieval person lived in a state of constant vigilance. Every decision, big or small, was a spiritual choice. Do you give in to anger? That's a victory for the devil. Do you choose to forgive? That's a victory for God. The line between the natural and the supernatural was thin. In fact, for most people, there was no line at all. The devil was a part of their daily reality. A constant personal enemy. People didn't just talk about the devil, they saw him everywhere. He was carved in stone on their churches. He was painted on their walls. He was a character in their plays. Art and stories were how they visualized their fears and their faith. Imagine being a peasant in the 13th century. You can't read or write. The Bible is a book of mysterious Latin you hear in church. Your knowledge of religion comes from what you see and what you hear. You walk up to the great stone cathedral in your town. Over the main door, there is a huge carving. It's the Last Judgment. On one side, you see Jesus in glory. Angels are leading the blessed souls into paradise. On the other side, it's chaos. You see demons. They are not grand, tragic figures like Lucifer. They are grotesque and monstrous. They have bat wings, animal heads, and claws. They are twisted and ugly, a mockery of God's creation. They are dragging screaming souls toward a giant gaping mouth, the hell mouth. It looks like a monster's face, breathing fire. This was a powerful message. It wasn't subtle. It said, this is real. This is what awaits you if you fail. You see demons on the outside of the church too, as gargoyles. These strange, ugly creatures leaning from the roof had a practical job. They were waterspouts. But they also had a spiritual one. They were reminders that evil was kept outside the sacred space of the church. They were like spiritual guard dogs. Inside the church, the devil was there too. In stained glass windows, you might see a story of a saint resisting temptation. The demon tempting him would be small and ugly, a pathetic creature next to the power of faith. In illustrated manuscripts, monks drew devils in the margins. Sometimes they were terrifying. Sometimes they were almost comical, little imps causing trouble. The devil was also a star of the stage. In towns and villages, people put on mystery plays. These were big outdoor productions that told stories from the Bible. The devil was a key character. He would often be played as a clown, a bumbling fool who always lost in the end. He would rant and rave, and the crowd would laugh at him. This was a way of coping with fear. By making the devil look ridiculous, people felt more powerful than him. He was a trickster, but God's plan was always smarter. But in other plays called morality plays, he was more sinister. These plays were not about Bible stories. They were about the life of an ordinary person called Everyman. Characters with names like greed, lust, and good deeds would fight for every man's soul. And the devil, or his vice-like servants, would be there, a smooth-talking tempter trying to lead every man down the wrong path. This was a direct lesson for the audience. This is your life, this is your struggle. And then there was the ultimate vision of the medieval devil, Dante's Inferno. Dante, an Italian poet, wrote an epic poem about his journey through hell. His vision became the definitive one. His devil is not a cackling monster. He is Satan, trapped in the frozen center of the earth. He is huge and terrifying. He has 3 faces, and in each mouth he chews on the greatest traitors in history, Judas, Brutus, and Cassius. Dante's Satan is a figure of immense tragedy. He is powerful, but he is also completely powerless. He is frozen in ice created by the beating of his own wings. He is the ultimate symbol of pride. He wanted to rise above God, and so he is trapped at the lowest point in the universe. He is the king of hell, but also its greatest prisoner. Through all these forms, from the ugly gargoyle to the tragic Satan, medieval people built a picture of their enemy. Art made him visible. Stories gave him a personality. It was a way of understanding evil, a way of containing it. By painting him on a wall or putting him on a stage, you could look your fear right in the eye. The devil didn't just tempt from a distance. The medieval mind came to believe you could actively seek him out. You could make a deal. This idea of a pact with the devil became one of the most dangerous beliefs of the age. It started with stories about holy men. A common tale was about a saint or a monk who was tempted by the devil. The devil would offer him power, or knowledge, or women. The saint would, of course, refuse. But the stories showed that the devil made offers. He was a negotiator. Over time, the idea changed. What if someone didn't refuse? What if they said yes? The concept of a formal contract with Satan began to form. This was not just a moment of weakness, it was a deliberate act of betrayal. A person would renounce God. They would reject their baptism. In exchange, the devil would give them something they wanted. Wealth, power, revenge on an enemy, or forbidden knowledge. This was seen as the ultimate heresy. It was a spiritual treason. You were not just sinning, you were switching sides in the great cosmic war. You were enlisting in the devil's army. The church's lawyers and theologians began to think about this in a very systematic way. They imagined what this pact would look like. It would be a ceremony, a dark mirror of a Christian sacrament. Instead of baptism, there would be a desecration. Instead of taking communion, you might trample on a cross. You would pledge your loyalty to Satan, your new master. This idea became deeply connected with the figure of the witch. In the early Middle Ages, a witch was often just a local folk healer, someone who knew about herbs and charms. The church was suspicious of them, but they weren't seen as devil worshippers. But in the later Middle Ages, that changed. The intellectual elites, the theologians, and inquisitors began to promote a new, more terrifying idea. They said witches were not just superstitious old women, they were part of an organized conspiracy. A secret society dedicated to overthrowing Christendom, and the source of their power was a pact with the devil. They developed a detailed mythology around it. They said witches would fly through the night on broomsticks, or demons disguised as goats. They would gather in the woods for secret meetings called a witch's Sabbath. The Sabbath was a horrifying parody of a Christian mass. They would kiss the devil's backside as a sign of fealty. They would sacrifice unbaptized babies. They would engage in wild orgies. All of this was described in lurid detail in books written by demonologists. The most famous of these books was the Malleus Maleficarum, or the Hammer of Witches. It was written in the late 15th century, right at the end of the medieval period. But it was the culmination of centuries of these beliefs. It was a handbook for witch hunters. It told you how to identify a witch, how to prosecute her, and how to get a confession. The book claimed that women were more susceptible to the devil's temptations. It said they were more carnal, more credulous, and weaker in faith. This misogyny fueled the witch hunts that would sweep across Europe in the centuries to come. The idea of the pact changed the devil's role. He was no longer just an external tempter. He was a feudal lord. He had vassals, the witches, who swore oaths to him. He was a rebel king, building an army on earth to wage war against God. This turned fear into paranoia. Your neighbor wasn't just a sinner, she could be an enemy soldier in disguise. This led to real-world consequences. The Inquisition, which was originally created to fight heresy, turned its attention to witchcraft. Accusations flew. People were arrested, often based on nothing more than a rumor or a personal grudge. As they were tortured, under torture, people would confess to anything. They would admit to flying to the Sabbath. They would name other people as witches. It created a cycle of fear, accusation, and death. The belief in a pact with the devil shows the society becoming more anxious, more fearful of hidden enemies. The devil was no longer just a spiritual threat to the individual soul. He was a political threat to the entire social order. And the witch was his secret agent. If the devil was a constant, active threat, How did people live with that fear? They didn't just despair. They believed they had weapons. They had a whole arsenal of spiritual tools and strategies to fight back. Life was a battlefield, but they were not unarmed. The most powerful defenses were the official weapons of the church. The sacraments. Baptism was the first line of defense. It washed away original sin, the stain left on humanity by Adam and Eve's fall. It was like being issued your first shield. It marked you as a soldier of Christ. This is why the death of an unbaptized infant was such a tragedy. The child had died before being formally enlisted in God's army. Confession was another crucial weapon. When you sinned, you were essentially opening a door for the devil. You were giving him a foothold in your soul. Confession slammed that door shut. By admitting your sin to a priest and receiving absolution, you were spiritually cleansed. The devil lost his grip. The Eucharist, or Holy Communion, was the most powerful sacrament of all. It was the literal body and blood of Christ. To receive it was to bring the power of God directly inside you. It was like a divine reinforcement. No demon could stand against the presence of Christ himself. Beyond the sacraments, people relied on saints. Saints were heroes of the faith who were already in heaven. They were seen as powerful intercessors. You could pray to them for help. Saint Michael the Archangel was the great warrior who had cast Lucifer out of heaven in the first place. He was the one you prayed to for protection in battle, spiritual or otherwise. Other saints were specialists. Saint Anthony was the one to call on when you were being tempted. There was a whole network of heavenly friends you could call on for backup. Then there were the physical objects that held spiritual power. Relics were the most potent. A piece of a saint's bone, a scrap of their clothing. These were believed to hold the saint's power. Churches were built to house them. People made long pilgrimages just to be near them. A relic was like a spiritual power plant, radiating God's grace and pushing back the darkness. The holy water was another common tool. It was water blessed by a priest. People would keep it in their homes. They would sprinkle it on their fields, on their animals, on themselves. It was a spiritual disinfectant. The sign of the cross was a simple, powerful gesture, a prayer you could make with your body. It invoked the power of the Trinity and the crucifixion. It was a way of saying, I belong to Christ, and it was believed to make demons flee. Even the church bells had a spiritual purpose. When they rang, they weren't just calling people to prayer. Their sound was believed to drive away demons. In a storm, the bells would be rung furiously, because a bad storm was often seen as the work of demons riding the wind. Living a good, humble life was the ultimate defense. The devil's primary sin was pride. So the best way to fight him was with humility. By being charitable, by fasting, by praying, you were strengthening your soul. You were making yourself a hard target. A soul filled with faith and humility had no room for the devil. So, the medieval world was not just a place of fear. It was also a place of immense faith. People believed they were locked in a desperate struggle, but they also believed they could win. They had a system, a set of rules, a team of powerful allies. The devil was real, and he was terrifying. But for them, God was always realer and always stronger. Their faith was not passive. It was an active daily fight, and they believed they had everything they needed to win it.